and welcome to Horror Rewind. This is Kelly Florence,
And I'm May Costello.
and today we're talking about Extremely Wicked. Oh gosh, tell me the rest of the title, Meg.
Shockingly evil and vile.
Yes, it's such a complicated title, but it makes
It's a
sense.
mouthful.
Yeah, but it makes sense because that's what the judge, how he describes Ted Bundy during his sentencing. Spoiler alert, he gets sentenced, people.
Spoiler alert, yeah.
So this dropped on Netflix today. So if you haven't watched it, I mean, we'll be talking about the movie, but if you know anything about Ted Bundy, we're not really giving any spoilers.
That's true. It's not really, I think for a lot of people, they already know all the facts. So,
Yeah.
how could it be a spoiler?
So this is directed by Joe Berlinger, written by Michael Werwey, and based on the book by Elizabeth Klopfer. And did I say her name right?
Oh, I guess. I don't know. I don't know
Okay.
how to say her name.
But
That,
she
that seems
was,
like a good, yeah.
yeah, she was Ted Bundy's girlfriend in real life, and she wrote this book. And so this was coming from the perspective of her experience and the things she saw. And so the thing that I was interested to see is that they actually didn't show him murder anybody until the very end.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And, there were parts of me that were kind of bothered by that because I wanted them to not, I was like, let's not romanticize him, let's show the reality. But I think it was really well placed, actually, because I think what they were trying to do was really show those two sides, because it's obviously that side of him that, which makes Ted Bundy so interesting, is that he, how do I describe it? It's there's so many killers where people in retrospect look back and they're like, oh, he gave me the heebie-jeebies, or I felt weird around him. But Ted Bundy just didn't give off that vibe to women, and that's what's fascinating about him. So I think they decided to do that, and I think it worked well. I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, well, and at first I was like, "Oh no, this isn't right because
Mhm.
it's going to romanticize him too much and people are going to feel a way about him that they shouldn't." But yet at the same time, we were seeing it from her perspective, and so she didn't see the murders and she didn't know until they showed it and he said it and admitted to her in that last scene. And so that was maybe it actually was more of a gut punch because we were along for the ride thinking, hey, maybe he is innocent. I mean, not really, but sort of.
Yeah, I think they did a good job of that too when Jim Parsons is that his name? He's kind of the prosecutor, and he sort of starts bringing up these really awful things, and that because it was kind of one of the first gut punches, but it was
Yes.
we'd gone, so long without really discussing the actual savagery of everything. So I thought they did that well timed, and you're right. We're watching everything from her perspective, which I'm really glad that we viewed it through that lens. I mean, I would have actually even embraced more from her side. But I think the important thing was to show, and like I said, that's what's so fascinating about him in particular, and not that he's special, and yes, we do not want to romanticize him. He's a monster. But what's so fascinating about him is that he was so well-spoken and intelligent and confident and handsome. He wasn't actually Zac Efron handsome, but he was handsome and all those things. And so I think it was really important to build that up before that tearing down, so to speak.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting too the credit sequence. They were showing some real footage, and he actually acted like that when outside of the elevator. Like I can't
Yeah.
even believe it. Like if you wrote that for a movie, it's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
so over the top, but it happened.
Oh yeah. I mean, and he actually proposed or got married to Carol like that, and
Are
he
you
actually
serious?
defended himself. Oh yeah,
Oh,
that's true. That's how much swagger that guy had, and that's why women were just but he can't have done it. He just, because it's when you see somebody like Ed Gein, or you see somebody even Jeffrey Dahmer, it's they kind of give you that vibe, you know what I mean? And
right.
you're just kind of I don't really feel comfortable. And every woman's been there. You just don't feel comfortable around a guy or whatever. But Ted Bundy was so I don't want to say the word good. He was such a chameleon that even like Anne Rule, who was in law enforcement and literally wrote true crime novels, had Ted Bundy walk her to her car so she wouldn't get murdered because she trusted him so much. And like women just thought he was so great. And it's fascinating because I think as women we all want to believe that we're gonna like pick up on it, and no one really could. And I think that was so important. And they showed like the whole dog scene, which I thought was really kind of interesting because it was like a dog can pick it up, but like no one else could.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. And I don't know. This is obviously I love true crime. I love learning about serial killers. So I'm kind of curious to hear what you think because you're not as like you're not as what's a nice way for me to describe myself? I'm like consumed by all this stuff, but
Right.
you aren't as much. So
Oh yeah, I'm
think.
adjacent to it, and especially like within the horror realm. I mean, we've done research now for our book and for some other projects. So I didn't know a lot about Ted Bundy going in, and one of the other fascinating things, and I'd seen this in that documentary that the same director released earlier this year. The other thing that seems fake, but it was real, is like he jumped out of the window, of the courthouse. Like, how can that happen?
I know.
And if
it's
you
like, that's not real.
no, if you wrote that in a movie or a TV show, people would be like, okay, well, that's really far fetched, but it happened.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. And then he got out again, and then he went and killed multiple people in Florida before he got caught. Like it's just fascinating. And I think throughout the whole movie, and I think it sounds like you were kind of saying this way too. It's like I didn't want them to be like romanticizing him, as we said, and I think I was starting to get a little disturbed because I'm like, well, we need to like talk about these real people who died. So I appreciated at the end that they said their names, and I appreciate actually throughout the movie they did mention some names, and so I feel in the end that they did a good job of like showing how he not only destroyed those people's lives, obviously, but how every woman in his life, like down to his mother, like he just completely was destroying them and killing them. Like when Haley Joel Osment answers the phone, he's like, "You're killing her," and I thought that was a really interesting choice of words because
Yes.
it was like these women want to believe, and they're put in these positions of he makes you feel like, no, everything's going to be fine, and like I'm going to figure this out, I'm going to control the situation, and he's ruining them too. So I thought they did that really well and subtly, but at the same time I feel like there might be like some young impressionable girls who could watch this and like not pick up on those nuances and just be like, oh my god, Ted Bundy is so hot. Like I worry about that, but at the same time I think the majority of people are going to watch it and see the like horrible monster, right?
Well, like you informed me a couple weeks ago, apparently people like Thanos, like people are hot for Thanos, so anything is possible.
If you can be in love with Thanos, like
I guess anything is possible. So I've got some facts. This is from a book called Why We Love Serial Killers: The Curious Appeal of the World's Most Savage Murderers by Scott Bond. It's available through Skyhorse Publishing. He wrote about some facts that I thought I'd share because I was curious after watching this. The FBI estimates there are currently 50 active serial killers right now in the United States. There are 15,000 murders that happen annually, so less than 1% of them, or about 1%, are from serial killers. 10% of total murders are committed by women. 80% of murderers, 10%, sorry, of serial killers are women, and 80% are white males.
Yeah.
So
fascinating. And they say that the sort of like height of serial killers was like the 70s and 80s because people were becoming more mobile, where you could drive cross country easily, and like there were just like certain elements that kind of made for serial killing, and like now it's more difficult just because of DNA and all the things that sort of come into play. But there are still serial killers out there, which is creepy to think about, and it's probably some white dude.
Yeah, yeah. I know. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. Some like, I mean, we don't hear about serial killers being caught. I mean, my guess if they're a serial killer, they're not getting caught, at least not all the time. But I mean, that guy just recently
Well,
was arrested in San Francisco, right? Or California.
yeah, I mean, well, and they're saying like the problem is that now serial killers, again, what fascinates us about Ted Bundy is about who he killed, because he killed often, well, he always young, beautiful women who were of usually a suburban type class. And they're saying that the serial killers now are more successful because they are targeting the, so to speak, less dead. But it's the guy like the Green River Killer. He lasted a lot longer than Ted Bundy. His reign went on forever because he was killing sex workers, and so people just, there was just less interest in it. I mean, I and then they then come to find out that this Gary Ridgway was actually kind of a moron, and I don't even know how he got away with it for as long as he did. But, so they're saying that these serial killers exist out there, and they are finding them. I mean, there's this one guy who was, again, killing people of color, and so he was able to operate for a lot longer. So it's just kind of interesting.
Yes, I mean, I think I've probably mentioned this before on the podcast, but thinking about how, when certain people go missing, if it's of a person of a certain class and race, it's on the
Mhm.
news, and other people, it's not even
Mhm.
mentioned, and that's really
Mhm.
scary. So,
Yeah.
oh,
Yep. So yeah, that's why I think Ted Bundy just like will always sort of endure and fascinate people, because he came about in this certain time when like serial killing started to really become like something that we as a society were understanding and like grappling with, but also just the fact that he was of a certain class too. I mean, he was like a big Republican, and he was in the sort of Republican sort of, I don't know, higher standings, and he'd been on the news, and he was in law school, and like, and all of these things where it's just like he couldn't possibly be the bad guy. And so I don't know, I think the whole thing obviously is just the scary realization that like he is the worst kind of monster. Like she says at the end, because I was like, are they going to talk about how he literally, like, his last victim was literally a 12-year-old girl? And I'm
God.
glad that she brought that up, because he's horrible. He's awful. And I just want to make sure that like that's made very clear. But which I think they did. But again, if they're walking that line because they're trying to show like from her point of view, and he wasn't, like, he literally, the last line that they had during the credits of actual Ted Bundy talking was like, it's not that person who looks like the Boogie Monster,
Right.
it's not. And so that was the whole point. But that was like a very tenuous tightrope they were walking, and I think they pulled it off, but I definitely had worry throughout.
Yeah, no, I did too. Speaking of performances, I think Zac Efron is an amazing actor. I mean, I've loved him since High School Musical days. That's my guilty pleasure, is that I used to watch High School Musical.
It's okay.
But I think I love Zac Efron, and I think he did a great job. I think Lily Collins was amazing. I even loved Haley Joel Osment.
That was cute.
I
I was like, I
know.
like this little romance. That's cute.
And like what an interesting casting
Yeah.
choice, unexpected, and I loved him.
Yes. And James Hetfield from Metallica was in it.
Yeah, what the heck?
Dexter's favorite band. And yeah, no, I thought the casting was really good. And yeah, I was thinking, it was funny because I was thinking, I'm like, I feel like if Ted Bundy was alive today, he would be so pleased to know that Zac Efron was playing him. Like, I think
Yeah.
that would just make him almost too happy. So I'm glad he's not around to know it. But yeah, I think Zac Efron was perfect. It's like he doesn't even look like him, but they made him look like him.
Yeah.
They did a really good job.
It totally worked.
Yeah, they did. He did a good job. Yeah, the casting was good, and in the end, I'm glad that it was really told from her perspective. I know that Ted Bundy is like the interesting character, obviously, because it's just like, how can you look away from somebody like that? But I thought they did a good job of really weaving in her story and, you know, showing it from her perspective.
Another interesting fact that I looked up while I was watching, the Ted Bundy trial was the first to be televised. It was the first trial.
Yeah.
And that, just think about now, you can tune into court TV or whatever and watch all of these high profile murder cases, but that was literally the first of its kind. And I know that he wanted the cameras out and everything, but did he really?
No.
I
He
mean,
loved it.
yeah, I think he loved it too.
Yeah, no, he loved all of it. Yeah, I think he really, really enjoyed all that. That's what's so annoying about him too, is because he was getting all that attention, but he loved getting all that attention. So in a way, he really got what he wanted, which is, you know, annoying, because you don't want like somebody like that to win. Not that he won, but
Right. Well, it's kind of
yeah.
like when they have these mass shootings or something, you don't say the killer's name,
Yeah.
I
Right.
realize it's
like,
different, but
no, I mean, it's not really, because it's like, yeah, you don't, that's again, and then therein lies the problem, where it's like, we should be talking about, you know, and her and the women that he murdered, but again, he's so fascinating. How can you not, like, want to sort of learn more about somebody like that? And like, I mean, because it's like, there's almost this aspect of like, how could he even be human? Like,
right.
It's just, I don't know. It's fascinating. And I thought that, you know, something that I like keep finding lately in research for our books is like this idea of like this female guilt for everything all the time. And like, no matter what we like feel guilty a man close to us did. And so I thought that was interesting that she was grappling with guilt in many different aspects. Like, you know, we think it's because she doesn't want him to get in trouble, but then it's like, really, she just feels like she couldn't protect these women. It's like, nothing she did is her fault.
Right.
Like, nothing should be on her shoulders. Yet I still was frustrated at the end, because it was like she was still was allowing him to like have power over her, which was like, ugh. But at the same time, that's the position that a lot of us put ourselves into in like abusive relationships and stuff, because, you know, that's unfortunately how it goes sometimes. So, I mean, that's reality, but just something interesting. And to think he has a daughter out there.
Oh, right. Do you know if she is in the public eye at all or anything?
No, she is very, like, nobody even knows her name.
Okay.
So,
well, that's
yeah,
probably for the best.
Yeah, that probably is for the best. Yeah, no, I know I've like literally Googled and tried to find like, oh, what's her story? Like, I wonder, and it's been, I guess, a very purposeful thing that. But can you imagine? I mean, she's about our age.
Wow.
And she must know.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
So I wonder what goes through her mind. You know.
You know, and speaking of, this is in a different realm, but Fosse Verdon is airing on FX right now, and their daughter is an executive producer on the show. And so she, her father was a monster in sort of a different way, and also a genius, because he was a brilliant choreographer and director, but he had a history of, sexual assault and abuse and and he was an alcoholic and, all of these things. Yet, she's putting it out there for the world. And not lifting him up as much as the book that show is based on. And so I think I mean, that must be an interesting place to come from too, if just a famous parent in general, but especially one who is problematic.
Yeah, I wonder if it's therapeutic to be like, here is my dad, warts and all, like, you know, like even Liz writing this book about being with Ted Bundy. I wonder if it was just like, here is like the reality of the situation. Maybe it made her feel empowered in a way or something.
Yeah, true. Well, let's rank this movie on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being you hated it, 10 being it's a perfect movie. We need to pick a scale.
Ooh.
Let's not give any power to Ted Bundy in this scale.
Okay. Okay, what about, it should be something that's so freaking ugly, because why is everything in the 1970s so ugly?
Oh,
Just
it was,
sidebar.
yeah, no,
what the heck?
Like the decor and fashion of the 70s, I mean, left a lot to be desired.
Like, I don't understand. Like, it's the glasses and like the everything. Like, everything was developed to make everybody look terrible.
It was
That's a
not good.
testament to how beautiful these actors are because they still look good. But
Right.
like, I don't know. So what about this? No, that's Ted Bundy related.
How about cups of coffee with Haley Joel Osment?
Mm, okay. I was like, this is so cute. I don't know if I feel like Haley Joel Osment doesn't want me saying he's cute anymore.
I
Like,
know. I
but I
know.
can't help it.
I know. So how many cups of coffee do you give this movie?
Oh, I'm gonna give it 8 because it was well acted, it was well written. I think that there the only reason I'm docking at points is because I would have liked to see a little more attention given to the actual people who died. I know that's a really hard thing to do in a movie like this, and also what to focus on. But there are also other aspects of the case I would have liked to have seen sort of explored and stuff. I know it's tough, but I think it deserves an 8.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7.5. 7.5 cups of coffee. I too, like I said, I was worried about them not showing him actually murder anybody until the end. I think it's an interesting choice how they ended up doing it. So, I mean, I think it worked, but like you said, at the same time, I mean, what does a movie look like though where you focus on the victims and then does that become
Yeah.
sort of voyeuristic if we're like, oh, we're just seeing all these women die?
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know. I don't know how you do this. And I think they did it probably the best way you could, which is through Liz's eyes. Because at least we're getting a female perspective and we're seeing sort of the destruction through her point of view. But yeah, like how do we want to watch people like die and run through the woods? I mean, like that
Right, and real
seems
people.
exploitive.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So
I
how
don't
do you
know.
do it?
I don't know.
I mean, I that would be something really scary to deal with. Like, I feel like that would be subject matter that would be really hard to like accurately feel like you're. I don't know. It's tough,
Right.
but I think it was well casted. It was a good, compelling movie. So
Yeah. I'm gonna give a shout out again to another real based true crime show. Escape at Dannemora. It dealt with the actual, real
oh
people who
yeah, I
got
haven't
murdered,
seen
and
that one yet.
they did it within one episode. And the way they chose to do it too is that they brought you along for this journey, and they didn't show you the terrible stuff until almost the end. Also in that show, because then it took you back into a new perspective. So, I mean, that's how they chose to handle it too. Maybe that is the best way.
Maybe, I don't know. Like I just finished watching The Act.
Oh yeah.
And I know there's been some controversy about that, and people were not watching it because Gypsy Rose is not. I guess she's not a fan of it.
Okay.
But at the same time, I thought it was a really well done show, and the thing is though, it's just like when you're going into somebody's lives, like it's people's lives and people who are dead, but also people who are living. It's like how do you do it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
How
tricky.
do you make everybody happy? And yeah, it is. So I don't know.
Well, thank you for listening, Horror Rewinders, and we'll be talking about more new horror and horror adjacent TV and movies as they come out. So until next time, we'll see you in the horror section.